Hello. Today I'm going to demonstrate two vegetative propagation techniques, which is tea budding and air layering. So let me start with the demonstration for tea budding. Now, budding is in a way basically using the same principle as grafting, where in case of grafting, we use a scion as a stem, basically. But in case of budding, the bud becomes the scion. So we have the stalk, which is the stem of a healthy plant, which is rooted. And then the non-rooted plant that we use as a scion is basically a bud. Now, the advantage of using a bud over another scion is basically we are cultivating a healthy plant, relatively more healthier. There is less graft rejection. Graft rejection could also happen in case of plant grafting, right? Where we do a graft, but then if the vascular cambium of the two components, the scion and the stalk, if the vascular cambium doesn't come in right contact, then the vascular supply will probably never happen. That can be avoided by using budding, and also for plants which are propagated by budding, that is the only option. There are certain plants which cannot be either propagated by stem cutting or other techniques of grafting, where budding could be the only way. So let me demonstrate this using a stem from the butterfruit avocado tree in my home. So I'll focus the camera on my table and then I'll demonstrate the experiment. I hope it's visible. Okay, so this is the stem that I have. Um, Now, it's important to first of all recognize what are buds. And by the way, we can use either the same species with different varieties, absolutely the same species, or there have been experimental approach with even different species. Although the success rate is extremely low, there have been various grafting techniques, including bud grafting for different species, where a plant produces two different varieties of flowers or say fruits in a single tree. So that has happened successfully. Now, basically here I have the same species because again, this is a demonstration and I couldn't find a lot of varieties here. And also it is important to note that this being our stock, I'm using this as a stock. So this should always be rooted. So this should not be plucked out. This should not be plucked out. It should have been rooted, but unfortunately, I cannot demonstrate in my garden, so it's over here. And the plant which I'm going to use for bud, so it's important, like I said, to recognize buds. Now, this over here is a potential bud. Now, buds are usually present towards the petiole, and it's important to cut them carefully. And also, it is ideal to cut the stem, which is our stalk, before going for incision of the buds, because buds has to be fresh. It has to have good water supply, or else the viability is lost. It is also important to remove all the leaves of the stalk before we proceed. And if there are any buds in the stalk, it has to be removed as well, because especially the buds which are below are grafted bud. Because if there are buds below, then that will start scavenging all the nutrients, all the minerals and water that we supply to the plant, and our graft will be deficient of all these. Now, basically, these deficiencies what causes inviability of graft. Again, I should be using a grafting knife, but due to lack of resources, I'm using a regular knife here. And I'm cleaning the stalk. Now, as I do this, I'm also noticing that there are a lot of buds on the stalk, and I don't need those buds. So now is the time to clear the buds from the stalk. So you can see these are essentially buds, so I need to remove them. While I do this, I should make sure that there is no tissue damage. Okay. Potentially all the buds are removed and this is my stock. And also this is rooted. Unfortunately, in the demonstration, it's not, but it's supposed to be rooted. Now coming to the bud, basically I need to first see where the bud is, and it's ideal to have a bud near the petiole. And in fact, I can actually show that some of the buds, for instance, this lateral branching over here with a small twig has actually arisen from a bud which is over here. This bud has germinated to give this twig. So this is how our graft would also germinate where the bud is present. So let me pick this bud over here, this one. So what I do is, again, it's important to ensure that there is no tissue damage. And this is my bud. I also need to remove the leaf. But while I do that, it's good to have the petiole of the leaf uh, present in the bud, because this petiole will help us in detecting growth. So essentially, if the graft has happened viably, then this petiole should still be fresh. And while we confirm the graft, if the petiole is dry, that means the grafting is never correct. And this will avoid us having to wait for maybe a few months to have the complete twig germinate. Even within a few days, if the petiole becomes dry, then we can assume that the graft is unsuccessful. So now coming to the T incision itself, the T incision happens in the shape of a T. So we have a capital T alphabet. So we make that incision, and it's always good to make the incision towards somewhere above, in the upper region. So let me make a incision over here. Now, while making the incision again, I need to make sure that I only remove the bark and the xylem. I shouldn't damage the phloem, because there can be chances of the stem bulging unevenly due to the sap being collected in the region of damaged phloem, which we do not want. And also make sure that the vascular cambium is not damaged. Okay. I made the incision over here. Now this is in the shape of a T. Basically, in the shape of a T, I made an incision over here. It may not be visible very clearly, but it's important to remove this like a jacket. So I use the back of my knife without damaging the incision, and then remove it this way. So if you can see at this point, I have the incision removed and the cork cambium is actually visible, right? And that is where I'm going to insert my bud. So that's my incision. This is the place where I insert the bud. So let me take the bud over here and let me insert it into the incision. And as I do this, it's also important to let the petiole come outside, okay? And make sure that it fits properly. This is how I have grafted the bud. So if you can see, this is where the bud is grafted. Now we're supposed to wrap this. I'll wrap it with a tape. You can use a polythene bag as well, making sure that the petiole is left and even the bud is supposed to be left free. Now, what could happen is we might have the bud covered with the polythene wrapper or something, and that will cause that will lead us to basically remove the polythene even while the bud is immature. So that can be a hazard. We could use polyfilm, which we use in microbiology labs, or a polythene bag will also do. For now, I'm using a tape. Make sure it's not too tight or too loose. So we just need to make sure that the vascular cambium of both comes in contact. And just like that, I have grafted my bud over here. So this is the grafted bud. That's the plastic film, and then if this was a rooted plant, then this would eventually germinate to give rise to another twig, which would come out as another branch on this stalk. And eventually, within a week or two, we can cut off the petiole like I did just now. So that if this petiole cut like this easily, that means it's still fresh, which means it's getting supply from the vascular cambium. If the petiole were dry, it would either turn brown or it would be difficult to cut, which is basically, hindering us to let go of the procedure. Now, coming to air layering is basically a assisted rooting technique. And also, it's important to note that by the end of air layering, we will be getting two different plants. So basically, we have one plant where we cause rooting due to air layering, and then we cut the plant right below the rooted region and plant it as another totally different plant. So this is one way of propagating clones or making a clone of an ideal plant, usually done when we perform plant breeding and we get a very good variety, and we want to preserve that. Then one way of cloning it would be via air layering. So again, for air layering, this should have been potted. This is not potted, so that's my bad. But this is a croton plant, by the way. And I'll tell you what the incision would go like. We need to look at the stem again here. The incision basically involves taking a strip of the bark across the entire circumference and then clearing the bark totally. So I'm using my knife to make an incision across, and I can see that the sap starts to bleed out, which is a good thing because this sap will allow us to remove the bark easily. We need to again ensure that we are not troubling the vascular cambium, and it's very easy to in fact take away the bark because of the presence of good amount of sap. So basically it happens via hand itself. Little bit. So with that, I have made a ring and I've basically removed my bark across the circumference. It's also good to slightly scratch the phloem present, because we do not want the phloem vessels to reconnect our layering process, because the layer has to, because only then the rooting would occur. Now we're supposed to take a polythene film, and basically it's supposed to be ideally a brown film is better than a transparent one, but for the sake of demonstration, I'm using a transparent one because I'll be able to show you how the things are happening behind the scenes. So what I do is I place the film over here, and initially I make I tie a knot at the bottom. So I need to wind it up and tie a knot at the bottom. And while I do so, I need to ensure that there is some space at the top, because that's where I'll be filling my soil and the rooting mixture. Although I do not have rooting mixture at the moment. Like that, I have made a knot. Let me tie a thread first to fix this place, and we can use any thread. I'm using a cotton, no, I'm using a jute thread, but yeah. Make sure that this is completely tight, because we do not want the water and the soil that we are adding inside this packet over here to fall off. That's one reason. And also another reason is the soil would lose its moisture if we are using a permeable strip of paper. So it's also, that is the reason why we basically use plastic, because if we use paper or cloth material, then that would be permeable to moisture, and whatever nutrient we are supplying in for our air layer would not be received by the air layer. Now here I have a humus-rich soil. Basically, this is manure prepared at my home. So I'm going to add a little bit of this manure into the packet. Um, as of now, I'm going to only add the manure, but it's ideal to also add auxins. Auxins are basically hormones which help in rooting. Cytokinins are the hormones which help in shoot formation. Now, since we already have a shoot, it's better to have auxin, which is, for instance, the most commonly used mixtures usually contain a formula of indole acetic acid, which is ideal. Um, I could also use soil. In fact, I do have soil here. Ideally, they should have been mixed properly, the manure and the soil, but I'm going to just add it like this for the sake of demonstration again. So I can now see that the region where I have made a air layering inside, basically the cut of the bark that is completely coated with soil. So I'm going to continue this tying process and seal our packet that we have formed over here by the soiling and the incision. So let me just tie it up. Do note that these two soils should have been with moisture. That would have been an ideal case, but since I'm demonstrating, I use dry soil. The moisture should not be lost, and it won't be lost that easily because we are using polythene and we are doing a proper seal. And that's how I make a air layering. So basically, this is where I had my incision. The entire bark was removed. Now that place is coated with manure and soil, and also hypothetically the rooting mixture, indole acetic acid. And then a polythene bag is used to cover it, and a thread is used to tie it. Now this place, if this plant were rooted, within a few days, I should see root formation in this region. So if within a few weeks, if I open this patch, I should be able to see small roots being formed. Once I have sufficient amount of roots formed after a little bit more of waiting, I would cut the plant over here, assuming that this is where the root is formed. I would cut the plant over here, and then this portion would be planted in the soil. So now, assuming that there is root, I would make the cut. Basically, I cut the plant over here. Then this part would have roots. So I would basically pot this into another soil, and then this root would continue to grow in the new soil. And I would basically have a new plant formed out of my previous plant from the top half of my previous plant. Thank you.